At 35,000 feet above the Atlantic Ocean, a former intelligence analyst whispered 3 urgent words to a billion-dollar CEO he'd never met before. "Don't move, breathe." In that frozen moment, with champagne still fizzing in crystal glasses and the hum of luxury engines masking deadly intent, everything hung in the balance. What hidden threat did he detect in the pristine cabin that even trained security missed? How did a single father struggling to rebuild his life after loss suddenly become the only barrier between corporate power and calculated destruction? And what unexpected connection would ignite between two people from completely different worlds, bound together by danger at 40,000 feet? Now let's step aboard the private jet where a quiet observation would unravel a conspiracy, save lives, and prove that courage doesn't need a uniform, only the will to act when seconds matter most. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you. Make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow, I've saved something extra special for you. The February morning broke cold and clear over Portland. The kind of crisp Pacific Northwest dawn that made the city's glass towers gleam like crystals against Mount Hood's distant peak. 42-year-old Ethan Graves stood in the cramped kitchen of his rented duplex, packing a lunchbox with the mechanical precision of someone who'd done it 1,000 times. Peanut butter sandwich, apple slices, granola bar, juice box. His 10-year-old son Riley sat at the small table, swinging his legs while sketching rockets in a worn notebook. "You think SpaceX will go to Mars in my lifetime?" Riley asked without looking up, his pencil moving in quick, confident strokes. Ethan smiled, the lines around his eyes deepening. "I'd bet on it. You might even be on that ship." Riley grinned, revealing the gap where his front tooth had been until last week. "That'd be cool. You could come too. Someone's got to make sure you eat your vegetables in zero gravity," Ethan replied. Zipping the lunchbox closed, the duplex wasn't much. A 2-bedroom rental in southeast Portland with thin walls and a furnace that rattled on cold nights, but it was theirs. After 3 years of rebuilding following his wife Lauren's sudden death from an aneurysm, Ethan had learned that home wasn't about square footage or granite countertops. It was about the small rhythms, breakfast together, homework at the table, Saturday morning pancakes that created a life worth protecting. Ethan had once been something different. For nearly a decade, he'd worked as a signals intelligence analyst for a defense contractor, spending long hours in windowless rooms, decoding encrypted communications, and tracking digital footprints across continents. The work had been demanding, often classified, and eventually corrosive. When Lauren died and Riley needed him fully present, Ethan walked away without looking back. Now he worked as a freelance data security consultant, mostly remote contracts that let him be home when Riley got off the school bus. The pay was a fraction of what he'd earned before, but he slept better. "Don't forget," Riley said, closing his notebook. "Science fair presentation is Thursday. You're coming, right?" "Wouldn't miss it," Ethan assured him. "What's the final topic again?" "Signal interference and how noise affects communication," Riley said proudly. "I'm using walkie-talkies and aluminum foil." Ethan felt a flicker of bittersweet pride. The kid had inherited his analytical mind, though Ethan hoped he'd use it for something less shadowed than classified intelligence work. "Sounds brilliant. Let's practice tonight." After dropping Riley at school, Ethan returned home to find an unexpected email waiting in his inbox. The subject line read, "Urgent consultation request, confidential." The sender was someone named Abigail Anderson, executive assistant to Victoria Thompson, CEO of Helix Global Technologies. Ethan opened it cautiously. "Mr. Graves, your expertise in digital security and signals analysis has been recommended by a funded by a copated by a cobayan signals analysis has been recommended by a commended mutual contact. Ms. Thompson requires immediate consultation regarding a sensitive corporate matter." She requests a face-to-face meeting tomorrow, February 10th, departing Portland International at 9 a.m. via private aircraft. Compensation will reflect the urgency and confidential nature of this engagement. Please confirm availability by noon today. Ethan leaned back in his chair, frowning. Helix Global was a tech giant specializing in satellite communications and encrypted data networks, the kind of company whose quarterly earnings moved markets. He'd heard of Victoria Thompson, a self-made billionaire who'd built Helix from a small software startup into a multinational powerhouse in less than 15 years. Her reputation was formidable, brilliant, demanding, and ruthlessly efficient. But a private jet meeting? That level of urgency usually meant either a massive security breach or corporate espionage. His instinct was to decline. He'd deliberately chosen smaller clients, mid-sized firms with straightforward problems that didn't pull him back into the world of high-stakes secrets. Yet the offered compensation, discreetly listed at the bottom of the email, was staggering. 6 months of mortgage payments in a single consultation, Riley's braces, the medical bills still trickling in from Lauren's final hospital stay, the college fund that remained painfully thin. Ethan exhaled slowly and typed a reply, "Available. Please send details." By noon, a courier arrived with a leather portfolio containing a non-disclosure agreement, flight itinerary, and a brief dossier on Helix Global's current projects. Ethan signed the NDA, arranged for his neighbor Mrs. Kowalski to pick up Riley from school the next day, and tried to ignore the faint hum of old instincts stirring to life. That evening, after Riley went to bed, Ethan sat on the back porch with a mug of coffee gone cold. The Portland skyline twinkled in the distance, and the air smelled faintly of rain and wet cedar. He thought about the path that had brought him here, from the high-clearance intelligence work that had consumed his 20s and early 30s, to the sudden devastating loss that had reordered every priority. Lauren's death had shattered him in ways he still couldn't fully articulate. One morning she'd been laughing over breakfast, teasing him about his terrible taste in podcasts. By that afternoon, she was gone, an aneurysm that gave no warning and left no chance. In the months that followed, Riley had clung to him with a desperation that broke Ethan's heart nightly. And Ethan had realized with brutal clarity that his work, with its endless travel and emotional detachment, was incompatible with being the father his son needed. So he'd quit. Walked away from 6-figure salaries, clearances, and the adrenaline of tracking threats across encrypted networks. He'd chosen small contracts, predictable hours, and the ability to be home for dinner every night. But now, staring at the city lights, he felt the old tension creeping back. A private jet, a billionaire CEO, a problem urgent enough to require immediate consultation. Whatever Victoria Thompson needed, it wasn't simple. Still, he'd committed. And Ethan Graves, for all his desire for a quiet life, had never been able to walk away when someone needed help. The next morning dawned gray and misty. Ethan dressed in his only good suit, a charcoal gray Lauren had picked out years ago for a conference he'd long forgotten. It still fit, though the shoulders felt tighter than he remembered. He made Riley's lunch, kissed his forehead, and reminded him about the science fair practice later that week. "Where are you going all fancy?" Riley asked, eyeing the suit suspiciously. "Quick business meeting," Ethan said lightly. "I'll be back tonight. Mrs. Kowalski will get you from school." Riley nodded, already absorbed in his breakfast cereal and a book about Mars rovers. Portland International Airport's private terminal was a different world from the bustling commercial gates Ethan occasionally used for rare trips. Here, everything was hushed, efficient, and discreet. A sleek black SUV met him at the curb, and within minutes he was escorted through minimal security into a private lounge. Abigail Anderson greeted him there, a poised woman in her early 30s with sharp eyes and a polite but distant smile. "Mr. Graves, Thank you for accommodating this unusual request. Ms. Thompson is already aboard. We'll depart shortly." Ethan followed her across the tarmac toward a gleaming Gulfstream G650, its white fuselage catching the weak morning sun. The engines hummed softly, and a flight attendant stood by the stairs, welcoming him aboard with practiced warmth. Inside, the jet was stunning. Cream leather seats, polished wood accents, soft indirect lighting. It smelled faintly of leather and expensive coffee. Toward the rear of the cabin, a woman sat alone at a conference table, her attention fixed on a laptop screen. She didn't look up as Ethan entered. Victoria Thompson was smaller than he'd expected from her larger-than-life reputation. Mid-40s, with dark hair pulled into a sleek ponytail, and sharp features that suggested both intelligence and impatience. She wore a tailored navy blazer over a white blouse. No jewelry except a simple watch that probably cost more than Ethan's car. "Mr. Graves," she said without preamble, finally glancing up. Her eyes were a startling gray, assessing him in a single sweep. "Sit. We'll talk once we're airborne." Ethan took a seat across from her, noting the way her fingers never quite stilled on the keyboard, the faint tension in her jaw. Whatever problem she faced, it had her rattled, and he suspected Victoria Thompson didn't rattle easily. The flight attendant, a young woman named Sophie, offered coffee and pastries. Ethan accepted both, more to have something to do with his hands than from hunger. The engines shifted pitch, and the jet began to taxi as they lifted off, Portland shrinking beneath them into a patchwork of green and gray. Ethan felt the familiar tightening in his chest that came with stepping into the unknown. He glanced out the window at the clouds rushing past, then back at Victoria, who had closed her laptop and was now studying him with an intensity that felt almost physical. "Thank you for coming on such short notice," she said, her voice crisp and controlled. "I'm told you're one of the best at what you do. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story." "I'm competent," Ethan replied evenly. "What exactly do you need help with?" Victoria's expression flickered, something vulnerable passing across her features before the professional mask returned. "Someone is trying to destroy my company, Mr. Graves, and I believe they're sitting in this cabin." The words hung in the cabin air like smoke. Ethan kept his expression neutral, though his pulse quickened. Around them, the jet continued its smooth ascent, the muted roar of engines and the faint vibration of flight the only sounds. Victoria Thompson watched him closely, gauging his reaction. "Elaborate," Ethan said simply. Victoria leaned back in her seat, fingers interlaced on the table. 3 weeks ago, Helix began experiencing data breaches. Small at first, fragmented code stolen from secure servers, encryption keys accessed without authorization. Our internal security flagged it, but by the time we traced the intrusions, the thief was gone. No digital footprints, no IP trails. Whoever did this knew exactly how to move through our systems invisibly. Ethan's analytical mind was already sorting variables. "Inside job?" "That's what our security team concluded," Victoria said. "We tightened protocols, changed access credentials, installed new monitoring software. The breaches stopped for 10 days. Then yesterday, our head of cybersecurity discovered something worse. Proprietary satellite communication algorithms, worth hundreds of millions in development costs, had been copied and sold to a competitor in Singapore. How do you know it was sold? Because the competitor announced a breakthrough product this morning that uses our exact methodology," Victoria said, her voice tight with controlled anger. "They'll launch in 6 months, undercutting our market and destroying a project we've spent 5 years building." Ethan absorbed this, his mind already running through possibilities. Corporate espionage at this level required sophisticated planning, access, and motivation. "You said you believe the person responsible is in this cabin. Why?" Victoria's gray eyes held his. Because there are only 4 people on this flight who had access to those algorithms. Me, my chief technology officer, my head of legal, and my personal assistant Abigail. One of them is a traitor, and I need you to help me figure out which one. Ethan felt the weight of the request settle over him. This wasn't a simple security audit or a technical consultation. This was counterintelligence work, the kind of shadowed, high-stakes analysis he'd walked away from 3 years ago. "Where are we flying to?" he asked. "Vancouver," Victoria said. "I have a private estate on Vancouver Island. We'll be there for 48 hours, isolated and secure. During that time, you'll interview each of them, review their digital activity, and identify the leak. I'm paying you to be invisible, efficient, and right." Ethan glanced toward the front of the cabin where Abigail sat working on a tablet. Then toward the rear where 2 other passengers were visible through an open partition. A man in his 50s with silver hair and wire-rimmed glasses, reading a thick binder, and a younger woman, perhaps early 30s, typing rapidly on a laptop. "You haven't told them why I'm here?" Ethan asked. "I told them you're a consultant evaluating our data security infrastructure for potential expansion into European markets," Victoria said. "A plausible cover. They have no reason to suspect otherwise." Ethan considered this. It was a dangerous game. If the guilty party realized they were under scrutiny, they might destroy evidence or worse, take aggressive action to protect themselves. And here, at 35,000 feet, there were limited options for containment. "I'll need access to their devices, communication logs, and travel records," Ethan said. "And I'll need your cooperation in creating opportunities for me to observe them without raising suspicion." "You'll have everything," Victoria assured him. "But Mr. Graves, understand this. Time is critical. If we don't identify the traitor before we land in Vancouver, they'll have the opportunity to disappear or transfer the remaining data they've stolen. This flight is our only controlled environment." Ethan nodded slowly. "Then we start now." For the next 30 minutes, Victoria briefed him in low tones, providing details about each suspect. The chief technology officer, Dr. William Brown, had been with Helix for 12 years, a brilliant engineer who'd helped design the very algorithms now stolen. He was methodical, reserved, and had recently gone through an expensive divorce that left him financially strained. The head of legal, Olivia Smith, was a Harvard-educated attorney known for her aggressive contract negotiations and loyalty to Victoria. She'd been with the company for 8 years and had access to every sensitive file as part of her role, overseeing intellectual property protections. However, her younger brother had recently been arrested for securities fraud, and the family was facing significant legal bills. Abigail Anderson, Victoria's executive assistant, was 29, competent, and had been with Victoria for 4 years. She managed Victoria's schedule, communications, and had administrative access to nearly every company system. Her background was clean, but she'd grown up in modest circumstances and now lived a lifestyle that seemed to exceed her salary. "Each of them has motive," Ethan observed quietly. "Financial pressure, access, and opportunity." "Exactly," Victoria said. "Which is why I need your expertise. I can't afford to accuse the wrong person, and I can't afford to let the guilty one escape." Ethan glanced toward the cabin windows where clouds streamed past in endless white. The jet's smooth flight felt deceptively peaceful, a luxury cocoon concealing the tension coiled within. He thought briefly of Riley, probably sitting in math class right now, oblivious to the fact that his father was 35,000 feet above the Pacific, hunting for a traitor among millionaires. "I'll start with casual observation," Ethan said. "Let me move around the cabin, strike up conversations, and get a sense of their baseline behavior. Sometimes the guilty party reveals themselves through micro-expressions, evasiveness, or overcompensation." Victoria nodded. "I'll create opportunities. But be careful, Mr. Graves. Whoever did this is clever, patient, and ruthless. They've already outmaneuvered our entire security apparatus. Ethan stood, adjusting his suit jacket. Then it's a good thing I've dealt with clever and ruthless before. He moved toward the rear of the cabin, adopting the easy posture of someone simply stretching his legs. The man with silver hair, Dr. William Brown, looked up as Ethan approached. "Dr. Brown," Ethan said with a polite smile, extending his hand. "Ethan Graves. I'm consulting on some security infrastructure projects for Ms. Thompson." William shook his hand, his grip firm but distracted. "Pleasure. You picked an interesting time to join us. Company's navigating some rough waters." "So I've heard," Ethan replied, settling into the seat across from him. Ms. Thompson mentioned some competitive challenges. William's expression tightened almost imperceptibly. "Corporate espionage, more like. Someone's been stealing our work and selling it. It's a nightmare." Ethan kept his tone casual. "Must be frustrating for you, given how much development goes into these projects." 12 years of my life," William said, his voice carrying a bitter edge. "And some opportunist walks away with it in a weekend. If I ever find out who did this, I'll make sure they never work in tech again." The anger seemed genuine, but Ethan had learned long ago that emotion could be performed as easily as concealed. He noted the slight tremor in William's hand as he closed his binder, the way his eyes didn't quite meet Ethan's directly. "Do they have any leads?" Ethan asked. "If they do, no one's telling me," William said. He paused, then added quietly, "Between you and me, I think it's someone internal. The breaches were too clean, too precise. Whoever did this knew our systems inside and out." Ethan nodded thoughtfully. "Well, I hope they catch them soon. Must be hard to focus on work when you're wondering if someone on your team is betraying you." William's jaw tightened. "You have no idea." Ethan excused himself and moved toward the front of the cabin where Olivia Smith sat, her laptop screen filled with dense legal text. She glanced up as he approached, her expression polite but guarded. "Miss Smith, Ethan Graves," he introduced himself. "Mind if I ask you a few questions about Helix's data protection policies? I'm trying to get a sense of the legal framework." Olivia's eyes sharpened with professional interest. "Of course. What specifically are you curious about?" For the next 10 minutes, Ethan engaged her in a discussion about intellectual property law, encryption standards, and corporate liability. Olivia was articulate and confident, but there was a tension beneath her words, a guardedness that suggested someone carrying heavy weight. "You must be under incredible pressure right now," Ethan said sympathetically. "With the data breaches and potential legal exposure." Olivia's expression flickered. "It's part of the job. Though I'll admit, the situation is particularly challenging. Whoever leaked those algorithms could expose the company to lawsuits, regulatory scrutiny, and reputational damage worth billions. Do you think it was intentional corporate espionage or something else?" Ethan asked. Olivia hesitated, choosing her words carefully. "I think someone made a calculated decision to prioritize personal gain over loyalty. And I think they underestimated how thoroughly we'd investigate." There was something in her tone, a hint of defensiveness that made Ethan's instincts prickle. He thanked her and moved on. Finally, he approached Abigail Anderson, who sat near the cockpit door reviewing Victoria's schedule on a tablet. She looked up with a professional smile. "Mr. Graves, can I get you anything? Coffee, water?" "I'm fine, thank you," Ethan said. "Actually, I was hoping you could help me understand Ms. Thompson's operational priorities. I'm trying to map out how security infrastructure integrates with executive decision-making." Abigail's smile remained, but Ethan caught a brief flash of something, wariness, perhaps, or calculation. "I'd be happy to help. What specifically do you need to know?" As they talked, Ethan watched her carefully. Abigail was smooth, composed, and gave away nothing. But when he mentioned the data breaches casually, her fingers paused on the tablet screen for just a fraction of a second before resuming their movement. It was subtle. But Ethan had spent years reading microtells in high-pressure interrogations. That tiny hesitation spoke volumes. He returned to Victoria's table, settling back into his seat. She looked up expectantly. "Impressions?" she asked quietly. Ethan leaned forward, keeping his voice barely above a whisper. "All three are under stress, which is expected. Dr. Brown is angry but seems genuinely betrayed. Olivia is defensive, possibly because she blames herself for not catching this sooner. But Abigail had a reaction when I mentioned the breaches, a micro-expression that suggests she's more involved than she's letting on." Victoria's eyes narrowed. "You think it's her?" "I think she's worth watching closely," Ethan said. "But I need more than a gut feeling. I need evidence." Victoria pulled out her phone, typed something quickly, then looked back at him. "I just sent you encrypted access to our internal server logs. Review Abigail's digital activity over the past month. Look for anomalies, unusual access times, or data transfers." Ethan pulled out his own laptop and began the work, his fingers moving across the keyboard with practiced speed. Outside, the jet continued its smooth flight north, the Pacific Ocean stretching endlessly below. But inside the cabin, the air had changed. Ethan could feel it now, the subtle shift in tension that came when predator and prey occupied the same space. Each aware of the other, but neither yet ready to strike. And somewhere among the cream leather seats and polished wood, someone was watching him back. 20 minutes into reviewing the server logs, Ethan found the first anomaly. His eyes narrowed as he traced the digital breadcrumbs, his pulse ticking upward despite years of training to remain calm under pressure. He glanced at Victoria, who sat across from him with the rigid composure of someone anticipating bad news. "Talk to me," she said quietly, her voice barely audible over the jet's steady hum. Ethan angled his laptop screen so only she could see. 3 weeks ago, at 2:47 a.m. Pacific Time, someone accessed your secure R&D servers from an IP address registered to a coffee shop in downtown Seattle. The login credentials used were Abigail's administrative account. Victoria's jaw tightened. She lives in Seattle. But why would she access company servers from a public location in the middle of the night? She wouldn't, Ethan said. Not if she were being careful. Public Wi-Fi is notoriously insecure, easily traced. If Abigail were actually stealing data, she'd use a VPN or an encrypted proxy to mask her location. He scrolled through more entries. But look at the pattern. Every suspicious access point traces back to locations Abigail frequents. Her apartment building's network, her gym, that coffee shop. It's almost as if someone wanted us to think it was her. Victoria leaned closer, her expensive perfume mixing with the scent of leather and recycled cabin air. "You're saying she's being framed?" "Possibly," Ethan said. "Or she's clever enough to make it look like a frame job. Either way, we need more information." He continued scanning the logs, his analyst's mind sorting through thousands of data points with mechanical efficiency. Then he saw it, a second pattern buried beneath the obvious one. "There," he said, pointing. "Overlapping access times. While Abigail's credentials were being used in Seattle, someone else was logged into the system from a different location. Victoria's own executive access codes, originating from an IP address in Portland." Victoria went very still. "I was in Portland 3 weeks ago for meetings, but I never accessed those servers. I have people for that." "Who has access to your login credentials?" Ethan asked. "Only Abigail," Victoria said slowly. "She manages my passwords, my security tokens, everything." Ethan felt the pieces shifting into place, but the picture they formed didn't quite make sense yet. So either Abigail used your credentials to access the servers while simultaneously making it look like she was accessing them from Seattle, Or someone else has both your credentials and hers. Which means the leak could be anyone, Victoria said, frustration cracking through her controlled exterior. We're back to square one. Ethan shook his head. Not quite. Whoever did this made a mistake. They left overlapping timestamps. No one can be in two places at once, and no skilled hacker would create such an obvious contradiction, unless they were in a hurry or under pressure. He pulled up a different set of logs. These ones tracking physical building access using security badges. Let's cross-reference digital access with physical location. If someone was in the Seattle office when your credentials were used in Portland, we've got our answer. For 5 minutes, Ethan worked in silence, building a timeline. Victoria watched, her fingers drumming a soft rhythm on the table, the only outward sign of her anxiety. Outside, the clouds had thickened, turning the sky a uniform gray. Then Ethan stopped, his eyes locked on the screen. Got it. Victoria leaned forward sharply. Who? 3 weeks ago, when your credentials were used to access the R&D servers from Portland, Dr. William Brown badged into the Seattle headquarters at 2:51 a.m., 4 minutes after the access occurred. And here, 2 days later when Abigail's credentials were used from that coffee shop, William was again in the Seattle office, this time badging out at 3:15 a.m. Victoria's face went pale. William has been with me for 12 years. He built half our infrastructure. Why would he betray the company? You mentioned his divorce, Ethan said gently. Financial strain can make people do desperate things. And he has the technical expertise to pull this off. Access to all the systems, knowledge of security protocols, and the ability to spoof credentials. Victoria closed her eyes briefly, absorbing the betrayal. When she opened them again, the vulnerability was gone, replaced by cold determination. We need proof. Something concrete enough to hold up in court. Ethan nodded. We need him to incriminate himself. And we need to do it before we land in Vancouver. He glanced at his watch. We've got about 90 minutes left in the flight. What do you suggest? Victoria asked. Ethan thought quickly, his old intelligence training kicking in. We set a trap. You announce to everyone on board that you've discovered the identity of the leak, and that you'll be turning over evidence to the FBI when we land. Watch their reactions. The guilty party will either try to destroy evidence, make contact with their buyer, or attempt to negotiate. Victoria considered this. It's risky. If William realizes we're onto him, he could become dangerous. We're 40,000 feet in the air with nowhere to go. Which is exactly why we have the advantage, Ethan countered. He's trapped here with us. He can't run, can't access external systems to warn his contacts, and can't destroy the server logs because they're backed up off-site. All he can do is react, and that reaction will give us the final proof we need. Victoria was quiet for a long moment, weighing options. Then she nodded decisively. Do it. She stood, smoothing her blazer, and walked toward the center of the cabin where all 3 suspects were visible. Ethan followed, positioning himself where he could observe everyone's reactions. Excuse me, Victoria said, her voice cutting through the ambient noise with practiced authority. I need everyone's attention for a moment. Dr. William Brown looked up from his binder. Olivia Smith closed her laptop. Abigail Anderson set down her tablet. All 3 turned toward Victoria with varying expressions of curiosity and concern. I wanted to inform you, Victoria continued, that our investigation into the data breaches has concluded. We've identified the individual responsible for stealing proprietary algorithms and selling them to our competitors. The cabin seemed to contract, the air growing heavier. Ethan watched each face with the intensity of a hunter tracking prey in tall grass. Abigail's expression was pure shock, her eyes widening. You found them? Who was it? Olivia's face showed grim satisfaction. Thank God. When will you make the arrest? But it was William's reaction that confirmed everything. For just a fraction of a second, his face went completely blank, the kind of emptiness that comes when the mind is racing too fast for the body to keep up. Then his expression shifted to careful neutrality, but his left hand, resting on the armrest, had begun to tremble. "That's excellent news," William said, his voice steady despite the tremor in his hand. "I assume you'll be coordinating with law enforcement?" "The FBI will be waiting when we land in Vancouver," Victoria said coolly. "We have digital forensics, server logs, and financial records that provide irrefutable evidence. The case is airtight." Ethan saw it then, the moment William's mind made a calculation and arrived at a desperate conclusion. The older man's eyes darted toward the cockpit door, then to the emergency exit row, then back to Victoria. His breathing had changed, faster and shallower. "Victoria," William said carefully, "could we speak privately for a moment? There's something I need to discuss with you about the legal implications." "Anything you need to say can be said here," Victoria replied, her tone leaving no room for negotiation. William stood slowly, his hands gripping the seat back. "I really think we should speak in private. It's a sensitive matter." Ethan moved subtly, positioning himself between William and Victoria. His combat training, dormant for years but never forgotten, thrummed to life. Every muscle in his body tensed, ready. "Dr. Brown," Ethan said quietly, "I'd advise you to sit back down." William's eyes swung toward him, and Ethan saw the moment the mask fell away completely. There was calculation there, and desperation, and something harder. The look of a man who'd crossed too many lines to turn back now. "You," William said slowly, recognition dawning. "You're not a consultant. You're the one who figured it out." "Sit down," Ethan repeated, his voice calm but carrying unmistakable command. Instead, William reached into his jacket pocket. The movement was fast, practiced, and sent a spike of adrenaline through Ethan's system. In the confined space of the jet, there was no room for error. "Don't move," Ethan said sharply. "Breathe." But William's hand was already emerging from his pocket, and Ethan saw the glint of metal, small, compact, utterly out of place in the luxury cabin. A pocket knife, barely 3 inches, but in the pressurized environment of an aircraft. Even a small blade was a catastrophic threat. Time seemed to slow, the way it always had in Ethan's previous life, when violence became inevitable. He registered Abigail's gasp, Olivia's backward scramble, Victoria's sharp intake of breath. He saw Sophie, the flight attendant, frozen in the galley entrance, her face white with shock. And he saw William's eyes, wild now with the desperation of a cornered animal. "You don't understand," William said, his voice cracking. "They're going to kill me if I don't deliver the rest of the data. This wasn't supposed to happen. I didn't have a choice." "There's always a choice," Ethan said, taking a slow step forward. "And the choice you're making right now, threatening people on an aircraft, that's terrorism. Federal prison for life. Is that what you want?" "I want my life back," William shouted, the knife trembling in his hand. "My wife took everything. The house, the savings, even my reputation. I had nothing left. Helix owed me. I built this company's infrastructure. I deserved more than a salary and a pat on the back." Victoria's voice cut through the chaos, steady and cold. "So you stole from me. From all of us." William's laugh was bitter. "You have billions, Victoria. Billions. What's a few million in algorithms to you? But to me, it was survival." Ethan continued his slow advance, his eyes never leaving the knife. "Put it down, William. You're not a violent person. This isn't who you are." "You don't know who I am," William spat. But his hand wavered. In that moment of hesitation, Ethan moved. Years of training compressed into 3 seconds of controlled action. He stepped inside William's reach, his left hand catching the wrist holding the knife and twisting sharply upward while his right drove into William's solar plexus with precise force. The knife clattered to the floor. William gasped, doubling over, and Ethan swept his legs, dropping him face first onto the carpet within seconds. Ethan had William's arms pinned behind his back, one knee pressed firmly between his shoulder blades. "Sophie," Ethan called to the flight attendant. "I need zip ties or anything that can serve as restraints." Sophie, shaking but functional, rushed to a storage compartment and produced a set of plastic flex cuffs from the aircraft security kit. Ethan secured William's wrists and ankles, then finally allowed himself to exhale. The cabin was utterly silent, except for William's ragged breathing and the steady drone of engines. Ethan stood, his suit jacket torn at the shoulder, his heart pounding but his hands steady. Victoria stared at him, something like awe mixed with relief in her gray eyes. "You just saved all of our lives." Ethan shook his head, already feeling the adrenaline crash beginning. "Just did what needed doing." He looked down at William, who lay on the floor with tears streaming down his face, and felt no triumph, only a deep, weary sadness. This was what desperation looked like, what happened when pride and financial ruin collided with poor choices. Olivia was on her phone, already coordinating with authorities on the ground. Abigail sat frozen in her seat, her face pale. And Victoria, composed despite everything, moved to stand beside Ethan. "When we land," she said quietly, "I want you to know that whatever you need, whatever I can do for you and your son, it's yours." Ethan met her eyes, seeing in them a recognition that went beyond gratitude, a connection forged in crisis. The beginning of something neither of them had expected, but all he said was, "Let's just get everyone safely on the ground." As the jet began its descent toward Vancouver through the heavy gray clouds, Ethan allowed himself one thought of Riley, safe in school, oblivious to how close his father had come to danger once again. And he wondered, not for the first time, whether the quiet life he'd built was ever truly his to keep, or whether some part of him would always be drawn back into the shadows where courage was measured in split-second decisions and lives. Hung in the balance, the Vancouver airport's private terminal buzzed with controlled chaos as the Gulfstream touched down. FBI agents in dark suits moved with practiced efficiency, boarding the aircraft before the engines had fully spooled down. Ethan watched from his seat as they escorted William Brown down the stairs in handcuffs. The man's shoulders slumped in defeat, all fight drained from him. Victoria stood near the exit, speaking in low tones with a senior agent, her composure restored but her eyes carrying a weariness that hadn't been there that morning. Olivia gathered her belongings with mechanical precision, while Abigail sat motionless, still processing the violence that had erupted just feet from where she'd been working. An agent approached Ethan, a woman in her late 40s with sharp features and kind eyes. "Mr. Graves, I'm Special Agent Patricia Hayes. I'll need a full statement from you regarding the incident." "Of course," Ethan replied, standing and straightening his torn jacket. His shoulder ached where he'd taken William down, a dull throb that reminded him he wasn't as young as he'd been during his intelligence days. The debriefing took 3 hours in a secure room at the terminal. Ethan walked Agent Hayes through every detail, from the moment he'd noticed the overlapping timestamps in the server logs to the final takedown. She listened without interruption, occasionally making notes, her expression giving nothing away. "You have extensive training," she observed when he finished. "Military?" "Intelligence work," Ethan said. "Signals analysis mostly. But we had tactical training for field operations." "Mostly," Hayes repeated with a slight smile. "That was some very effective mostly we saw today." She closed her notebook. "Dr. Brown is cooperating fully now. He's admitted to selling the algorithms to a Singapore-based competitor for $3 million, with another $2 million promised upon delivery of additional proprietary code. He claims he was threatened when he tried to back out of the deal. Do you believe him?" Ethan asked. Hayes shrugged. Doesn't matter what I believe. What matters is what we can prove. And thanks to your work on that jet, we have enough evidence to put him away for a long time. She stood, extending her hand. Miss Thompson is waiting for you. She's asked that you join her at her estate tonight. I understand she'd like to discuss ongoing security concerns. Ethan hesitated. His original plan had been to fly back to Portland immediately, to be home when Riley got out of school tomorrow. But something in Hayes's tone suggested this wasn't a simple thank you dinner invitation. What kind of security concerns? He asked. Hayes's expression grew serious. The people Dr. Brown was working with, they're not the kind to accept failure quietly. Miss Thompson may still be at risk. The words settled over Ethan like cold water. Of course it wasn't over. It never was. Corporate espionage at this level had layers, and they'd only peeled back the first one. Victoria's estate on Vancouver Island was accessed by helicopter, a 15-minute flight over dark water and dense forest. The house itself was a masterpiece of modern architecture, all glass and steel cantilevered over a cliff with views of the Pacific stretching to the horizon. Despite the luxury, Ethan felt only a bone-deep exhaustion as he stepped into the soaring foyer. Victoria met him there. Having changed into jeans and a soft gray sweater that made her look younger, more approachable. You must be tired, she said. I've had a room prepared for you. We can talk in the morning if you'd prefer. I'd rather talk now, Ethan said. Agent Hayes mentioned ongoing security concerns. Victoria's expression tightened. Follow me. She led him through the house to a study lined with books, a fire crackling in a stone fireplace. Floor-to-ceiling windows showed the ocean beyond, dark and restless under a clouded sky. Victoria poured 2 glasses of whiskey and handed him one. William gave the FBI the name of his contact, she said without preamble. A man named Chun Zhao, head of acquisitions for Pacific Digital Systems in Singapore. But when they tried to contact Zhao for questioning, they discovered he'd disappeared. Left Singapore 3 days ago, destination unknown. Ethan took a slow sip of whiskey, feeling its warmth spread through his chest. You think he's coming after you? I think he paid $3 million for half of what he was promised, Victoria said. And I think men who operate at that level don't accept losses gracefully. She moved to the window, her reflection ghostly in the dark glass. The FBI has offered protection, but they can't watch me forever. And I refuse to live in fear, looking over my shoulder for however long it takes them to find Zhao. What are you asking me? Ethan said quietly. Victoria turned to face him. Stay, not forever, just until this is resolved. You see things others miss. You read situations before they become crises. Today on that jet, you saved my life and possibly everyone else's. I need someone like you close until we know the threat is neutralized. Ethan thought of Riley, of the promise he'd made to always be there, to never let work pull him away the way it had before Lauren died. I have a son, he said, 10 years old. I've built my entire life around being present for him. What you're asking, it would mean being away, being unavailable in ways I swore I'd never be again. Bring him here, Victoria said immediately. There's plenty of space. He can attend the international school in Victoria, just 20 minutes by boat. You'd see him every day, more than you probably do now with your work schedule. For how long? Ethan asked. 2 weeks, Victoria said. Maybe 3. However long it takes for the FBI to locate Zhao and neutralize the threat. Ethan walked to the window, staring out at the black ocean. He thought about the look in William's eyes when desperation had overtaken reason, the feel of the knife being twisted from his grip, the weight of responsibility for other people's lives. He'd walked away from that world for good reasons, but standing here now, he realized something uncomfortable. Part of him had missed it, not the violence, Not the danger, but the clarity of purpose. The feeling of skills being used for something that mattered. "I need to talk to my son," he said finally. "If he's not comfortable with this, the answer is no." Victoria nodded. "Of course. Use any phone in the house. And Ethan, whatever you decide, thank you. For today, for everything." Ethan called Riley from the study while Victoria discreetly stepped out. His son answered on the second ring, breathless with excitement. "Dad, guess what? Mrs. Kowalski let me help her make pierogi. I learned how to pinch the edges so the filling doesn't leak out." The normalcy of it, the innocent enthusiasm, made Ethan's chest tighten. "That sounds amazing, bud. Listen, I need to talk to you about something important." He explained the situation carefully, leaving out the violence but being honest about the need to stay in Vancouver for a while. "There's a woman who needs help making sure she's safe," Ethan said. "And I'm good at that kind of work. But it would mean you and I staying here together for a couple weeks. New place, new school temporarily. What do you think?" Riley was quiet for a long moment. "Is she nice? The woman who needs help?" "She is," Ethan said. "Very smart, too. She runs a technology company. And we'd be together? You wouldn't be gone all the time like before?" The question cut deep. "We'd be together every day," Ethan promised. "I'd take you to school, pick you up, help with homework, all of it." Another pause. Then Riley said, "Okay, but only if I can bring my rocket models. And can we still do the science fair project when we get back?" Ethan felt relief wash through him. "Absolutely. I'll arrange everything." After they said goodbye, Ethan stood holding the phone, looking out at the dark Pacific. He was making another choice, stepping back toward the world he'd tried to leave behind. But this time, he told himself, it would be different. This time, Riley would be with him. This time, he wouldn't lose sight of what mattered most. Victoria returned, reading his expression. "He said yes?" "He said yes," Ethan confirmed. "I'll need a few days to arrange things in Portland, get his school records, pack properly." "Whatever you need," Victoria said. "I'll have my assistant coordinate everything." She hesitated, then added, "I know this isn't what you signed up for when you agreed to consult for a day. I know I'm asking a lot." "You are," Ethan agreed. "But someone needs to do it, and apparently, I'm someone who can't walk away when people are in danger." He managed a tired smile. "My wife used to say it was my most annoying quality." Something shifted in Victoria's expression, a softness that hadn't been there before. "It sounds like she knew you well." "She did," Ethan said quietly. "Better than I knew myself sometimes." They stood in comfortable silence for a moment, the fire crackling, the ocean murmuring beyond the glass. Then Victoria said, "There's something else you should know. When the FBI searched Williams' communications, they found evidence that he wasn't working alone. There's someone else inside Helix, someone who helped him access systems he couldn't reach on his own." Ethan's exhaustion vanished, replaced by sharp focus. "Who? They don't know yet," Victoria said. "But whoever it is, they're still out there. And they know we're looking." 3 days later, Ethan stood in the arrival area of Victoria International Airport, watching Riley emerge from the passenger tunnel with a backpack nearly as big as he was, and carrying a carefully wrapped box containing his precious rocket models. Mrs. Kowalski shuffled behind him. Having insisted on accompanying Riley on the flight despite Ethan's assurances that the airline's unaccompanied minor service was perfectly safe. "Dad!" Riley dropped his backpack and launched himself at Ethan, who caught him in a fierce hug. "Hey, bud. Good flight?" "Mrs. Kowalski snored the whole time," Riley said cheerfully. "But the pilot let me see the cockpit before we landed. Did you know there are over 300 switches and buttons up there?" Ethan glanced at Mrs. Kowalski, who was red-faced but smiling. "Thank you for bringing him. I know it was an inconvenience." "Nonsense. the older woman said in her thick Polish accent. "This boy is like grandson to me. Besides, I wanted to make sure this place is good enough for him." She looked around the small airport appraisingly. "Seems clean, at least." Victoria had sent a car, a comfortable SUV with a driver named Thomas, who loaded their luggage with quiet efficiency. The drive to the ferry terminal took 20 minutes through evergreen forests and past small coastal towns. Riley pressed his face to the window, taking in everything with wide-eyed wonder. "Is it always this green?" he asked. "Pretty much," Ethan said. "Rainforest climate. You'll probably need a rain jacket most days." The ferry crossing to Vancouver Island was Riley's favorite part. He stood at the rail with Ethan, watching seals bob in the wake and eagles circle overhead. Mrs. Kowalski sat inside with the other passengers, occasionally glancing out to make sure Riley hadn't fallen overboard. "Dad," Riley said quietly, "is this about the thing that happened on the plane? The thing you didn't want to talk about?" Ethan had known this question would come. Riley was too perceptive to miss the subtext. "Yeah," he admitted. "Something dangerous happened, and I helped stop it. Now we're making sure nothing else dangerous happens." Riley considered this. "Like a bodyguard?" "More like a really observant friend," Ethan said. "Someone who notices things and helps solve problems before they get worse." "Cool," Riley said. Then, after a pause, "Is the lady nice?" "Ms. Thompson?" "She is," Ethan said. "Though she's had a hard week. Someone she trusted betrayed her, and that's never easy. Like when Jake Carter told everyone my volcano model was dumb even though we were supposed to be partners?" Riley asked. Ethan smiled despite himself. "Something like that, yeah. Except with higher stakes." When they arrived at Victoria's estate, Riley's eyes went wide. "This is a house? It looks like something from a movie." Victoria met them at the door, having clearly made an effort to appear approachable. She wore jeans and a casual blouse, her hair loose around her shoulders instead of pulled back in her usual severe ponytail. "You must be Riley," she said, offering her hand. "I'm Victoria. Your dad told me you're interested in rockets." Riley shook her hand solemnly. "Yes, ma'am. I want to work for SpaceX someday. Or maybe NASA." "Good choices," Victoria said. "I actually know someone at SpaceX. Maybe we could arrange a video call if you're interested." Riley's face lit up. "Really? That would be amazing." Ethan watched the interaction with quiet gratitude. Victoria was making an effort, and it showed. She gave Riley a tour of the house, pointing out the media room, the game room, and most importantly, the room that would be his for the next few weeks. It had floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the forest, and a desk perfect for homework and model building. "This is awesome." Riley breathed. Mrs. Kowalski inspected everything with a critical eye before finally declaring the arrangements acceptable. She pulled Ethan aside before leaving. "You be careful," she said quietly in Polish, a language Ethan had picked up during his intelligence days. "That woman, she has kind eyes but also worried eyes. Whatever trouble she is in, do not let it become your trouble too." "Too late for that," Ethan replied in the same language. "But I'll be careful. For Riley's sake." The older woman squeezed his arm, then left with Thomas to catch the return ferry. That evening, after Riley was asleep, Ethan and Victoria sat in her study reviewing the FBI's latest findings. Special Agent Hayes had sent an encrypted file containing everything they'd learned about Chun Zhao and Pacific Digital Systems. Zhao has connections to organized crime syndicates in Southeast Asia. Victoria said, reading from the report. Money laundering, industrial espionage, even suspected involvement in human trafficking. William didn't just sell company secrets. He got in bed with genuinely dangerous people. Ethan studied photographs of Zhao, a man in his 50s with a bland, unremarkable face that would disappear in any crowd. And the second insider? Any progress identifying them? Nothing concrete, Victoria said. But the FBI did find something interesting. The algorithm William sold was incomplete, missing key security protocols that would make it actually functional. Whoever helped him knew enough to sabotage the theft without William realizing it. Ethan leaned back in his chair, processing this. So the second insider was either having second thoughts or protecting Helix's interests while still assisting William. That suggests someone conflicted, possibly being coerced or blackmailed. That was my thought too, Victoria said. She pulled up personnel files on her laptop. I've narrowed it down to 3 people who had the technical knowledge and system access to help William, my lead network engineer, my director of cloud infrastructure, and my chief information security officer. Let me guess, Ethan said. All 3 are above reproach with spotless records and strong loyalty to the company. Exactly, Victoria said. Which makes this infinitely more complicated. They worked late into the night, building profiles and timelines. Around midnight, Ethan excused himself to check on Riley, finding his son sleeping soundly with a half-built model rocket on the nightstand and a book about Mars missions open across his chest. Ethan carefully marked the page and set the book aside, then stood watching Riley sleep, feeling the familiar swell of protective love that had defined his entire life since Lauren's death. When he returned to the study, Victoria had poured more whiskey. "You're good with him," she said. "Riley, I mean. It's clear he trusts you completely." "He's everything to me," Ethan said simply. "After my wife died, he was the only reason I kept functioning. I'd wake up in the morning with no desire to face the day. And then I'd hear him in the next room singing to himself or asking what was for breakfast. And suddenly I had a reason." Victoria's expression softened. "What was she like?" "Your wife?" Ethan hadn't talked about Lauren in depth with anyone in years. But something about the late hour, the whiskey, and Victoria's genuine interest made the words come easier. "She was a teacher," he said. "3rd grade. She had this gift for making every student feel seen and valued. And she was funny, sharp humor that could cut through any tension. She kept me grounded when my work threatened to consume me." "Do you still miss her?" Victoria asked quietly. "Every day," Ethan admitted. "But it's different now. Less like drowning, more like carrying something heavy that's become part of me. Riley helps. He has her smile, her way of finding joy in small things." Victoria was quiet for a moment. Then she said, "I was married once. Briefly in my 20s. He couldn't handle the hours I worked, the ambition. Said I loved the company more than I loved him. Maybe he was right." She swirled her whiskey. "I've spent 20 years building Helix, and I'm proud of what we've accomplished. But sometimes I wonder what I sacrificed along the way." "Success always costs something," Ethan said. "The trick is making sure the cost doesn't exceed the value." Their eyes met, and something unspoken passed between them, a recognition of shared loneliness, of lives built around duty and responsibility that left little room for anything else. "Thank you for being here," Victoria said. "For bringing Riley, for putting your life on hold to help solve my problems. I know it wasn't an easy choice. Probably wasn't a smart choice either," Ethan said with a slight smile. "But I learned a long time ago that the right thing and the smart thing aren't always the same." Over the following days, they fell into a routine. Ethan took Riley to the international school each morning, then returned to work with Victoria on identifying the second insider and tracking Zhao's movements. The FBI had traced Zhao to Hong Kong, then lost him. Credit card trails had gone cold. He'd become a ghost. Meanwhile, Ethan interviewed Victoria's 3 suspects under the guise of security audits. The network engineer was nervous but seemed genuinely ignorant. The cloud infrastructure director was defensive but transparent. And the chief information security officer, A woman named Hannah Clark was almost too cooperative, answering questions before they were asked and volunteering information unprompted. "She's hiding something," Ethan told Victoria after the third interview. "I just can't figure out what." That night, lying in bed in the guest room, Ethan stared at the ceiling, listening to the ocean beyond his window. He thought about the path that had led him here. From intelligence analyst to grieving widower to single father trying to rebuild. And now to whatever this was, protector, investigator. Reluctant guardian standing between a brilliant woman and the shadows that pursued her. He thought about Victoria too. About the way she'd gently corrected Riley's rocket calculations at dinner. About her quiet sadness when she'd spoken of her failed marriage. About the trust she'd placed in him, despite knowing him for less than a week. And he wondered if he was capable of opening his heart again after Lauren. If Riley was ready for that kind of change. If the danger surrounding Victoria would ever truly resolve. Or if he was walking into something with no clean ending. His phone buzzed. A text from Victoria. "Can't sleep. Security footage shows someone tried to access the estate's perimeter cameras tonight. False alarm, but I'm rattled. Thank you for being here." Ethan replied, "I'll do a full sweep in the morning. Try to get some rest. You're safe." 3 dots appeared, then disappeared, then appeared again. "Finally, because you're here, I believe that." Ethan set the phone down, his chest tight with feelings he wasn't ready to name. Outside, the ocean whispered against the cliff. And somewhere in the darkness, threats circled and waited. But for tonight, everyone he cared about was safe under one roof. And that would have to be enough. The morning broke gray and misty, typical for Vancouver Island in February. Ethan was up before dawn, running the perimeter of Victoria's estate with the methodical focus of someone checking for weaknesses. The property was extensive, nearly 20 acres of forest and cliffside. Protected by cameras and motion sensors, but still vulnerable to someone determined enough. He found it near the eastern boundary. A camera that had been carefully repositioned during the night, angled away from a service access point that maintenance crews used. Subtle but deliberate. Someone had been probing defenses, testing response times. Victoria joined him at the camera location, pulling a rain jacket tight against the drizzle. "Show me." Ethan pointed to the disturbed ground, boot prints in soft earth that didn't match any of the estate's security personnel. "Someone came through here last night, adjusted the camera, then left the same way. They didn't try to breach, just surveyed." "Zhao?" Victoria asked, her voice tight. "Or someone working for him," Ethan said. "Either way, they know where you are, and they're planning something." Back at the house, Ethan called Special Agent Hayes with an update. She listened without interruption, then said, "I'm sending a tactical team to the island. They'll set up discreet surveillance around the estate perimeter. In the meantime, I need you to continue working the insider angle. If someone on Victoria's team is feeding information to Zhao, we need to identify them before they can provide entry assistance." After Riley left for school, Ethan and Victoria set up in her home office to review digital forensics from Hannah Clark's work accounts. Victoria's technical team had provided detailed logs of every file access, email, and system login for the past 6 months. "Walk me through her role," Ethan said. "Pulling up the data on dual monitors. Hannah oversees all information security," Victoria explained. "Firewall management, intrusion detection, access controls. If anyone tried to breach our systems, she'd be the first to know. Which makes her perfectly positioned to either stop threats or enable them," Ethan observed. He sorted through Hannah's file access logs, looking for patterns. Here, 3 weeks before William's first data theft, Hannah accessed the backup systems and modified the audit logging protocols. Victoria leaned closer to the screen. "Why would she do that?" "To create blind spots," Ethan said. "If you reduce the granularity of audit logs, You make it harder to trace specific actions later. It's a classic insider tactic. Create just enough noise in the system that suspicious activity gets lost in legitimate traffic. They continued digging, and the evidence mounted. Hannah had accessed William's user account credentials multiple times, always with plausible justifications, routine password resets, security audits. But the timing aligned perfectly with when William needed access to systems beyond his normal authorization level. She was enabling him, Victoria said, anger and betrayal mixing in her voice. All this time, I trusted her to protect us, and she was the one helping tear us down. The question is why, Ethan said. He pulled up Hannah's personnel file, scanning her background. Clean record, 15 years in cybersecurity, excellent performance reviews. Then he saw it, a note in her emergency contact information. Brother, Thomas Clark, currently incarcerated, federal prison. Seattle. Ethan did a quick search on Thomas Clark and felt the pieces click into place. Her brother is serving 8 years for securities fraud. He's been in prison for 3 years, which means he has 5 years left. That's leverage. Victoria's eyes widened. You think Zhao threatened her brother? Or offered to help him, Ethan said. Early release, better conditions, protection inside. For someone with the right connections, prison is just another system to manipulate. If Zhao approached Hannah and said he could make her brother's life easier in exchange for cooperation, she might have felt she had no choice. We need to confront her, Victoria said. Carefully, Ethan cautioned. If she feels cornered, she might warn Zhao or destroy evidence. We need her to confess voluntarily, and we need her cooperation to set a trap. They arranged a meeting under the pretense of a security review. Hannah arrived at the estate that afternoon, professional and composed in a dark blazer and carrying a laptop. Ethan watched her carefully as Victoria led her into the study, noting the slight tension in her shoulders, the way her eyes scanned the room before settling. Hannah, thank you for coming, Victoria began, her tone measured. We've been reviewing system access logs from the past few months, and some irregularities have come to our attention. Hannah's expression didn't change, but Ethan saw her hands tighten fractionally on the laptop. What kind of irregularities? Ethan stepped forward. Audit log modifications, unauthorized credential access, timing that correlates with Dr. Brown's data theft. We know you helped him, Hannah. What we don't know yet is why. For a long moment, Hannah said nothing. Then her shoulders sagged, and she closed her eyes. When she opened them again, tears tracked down her cheeks. They have my brother, she said, her voice breaking. Zhao's people, they got to him in prison 6 months ago. They said if I didn't help them, Tommy would die. They sent me photos, proof that they could reach him whenever they wanted. Victoria's anger softened into something more complex. Why didn't you come to me? Why didn't you ask for help? Because I didn't think you could protect him, Hannah said. Zhao's organization has reach everywhere, inside prisons, inside law enforcement. And I was terrified. Tommy is all the family I have left. Our parents are gone. I couldn't let him die because I chose my job over his life. Ethan sat down across from her. Tell us everything. What did they ask you to do? What information did you provide? Hannah took a shaky breath and began talking. She'd been contacted 6 months ago, through an encrypted message that included photographs of her brother being threatened by other inmates. The message gave instructions: provide administrative credentials, modify audit logs, and ensure William Brown had access to specific research databases. I didn't know what William was stealing at first, Hannah said. They kept me compartmentalized. I just did what they asked and prayed it would be enough to keep Tommy safe. But you sabotaged the theft, Ethan said. You made sure the algorithms William delivered were incomplete. Hannah nodded. Once I realized what they were after, I couldn't let them have everything. I removed key security protocols from the files, made subtle changes that would render the algorithms useless witout the missing pieces. I thought if I could buy time, maybe the FBI would catch them before they realized. Did Zhao know about the sabotage? Victoria asked. I don't think so, Hannah said. At least not at first. But after William was arrested, I got another message. They know something went wrong, and they're angry. They said if I don't provide the missing code within 48 hours, Tommy dies. Ethan exchanged a glance with Victoria. When did you receive this message? Yesterday, Hannah whispered. I have 1 day left. The room fell silent except for the soft patter of rain against the windows. Ethan's mind raced through options, risks, possibilities. This was the break they needed, but it was also desperately dangerous. Here's what we're going to do, he said finally. You're going to respond to Zhao and agree to provide the missing code. But instead of the real protocols, we're going to give him a modified version. One that will allow the FBI to track anyone who tries to implement it. We turn you into a double agent and use Zhao's desperation against him. Hannah looked up, hope and fear warring in her expression. And Tommy? Can you protect him? I'll make sure the FBI moves into protective custody immediately, Victoria said. We'll keep him safe, Hannah. But you have to trust us and cooperate fully. Hannah nodded, wiping her eyes. Okay, tell me what to do. The plan came together with the precision of a military operation. Special Agent Hayes coordinated with federal prison authorities to move Hannah's brother Thomas into protective isolation within hours. Meanwhile, Ethan worked with Victoria's technical team to create a Trojan horse. Modified algorithm code embedded with tracking software that would phone home the moment anyone attempted to compile or implement it. Hannah sat in Victoria's study. Her laptop open, hands trembling as she prepared to send the message that would either save her brother or doom them all. Ethan stood behind her, watching the screen while FBI technicians monitored from a remote location. Remember, Ethan said quietly, keep it brief and professional. Don't give them any reason to suspect you're cooperating with us. Hannah typed, have the missing protocols. Ready to transfer. Need confirmation of brother's safety first. The response came within 3 minutes. Transfer files to secure drop site. Confirmation will follow delivery. Hannah's jaw tightened. They won't show me proof Tommy's okay until after I give them everything. That wasn't the deal. They're not planning to honor any deal, Ethan said. Once they have what they want, you become a liability. That's why we're setting this trap. Victoria placed a hand on Hannah's shoulder. We have Thomas. He's safe. Whatever happens next, I promise you that much is real. Hannah nodded and uploaded the modified files to the encrypted server location Zhao's people had provided. The progress bar crawled across the screen, and when it hit 100%, they all exhaled. Done, Hannah whispered. Agent Hayes' voice came through the speakerphone. We're tracking the download now. Someone accessed the files from an IP address in Victoria, British Columbia. Local field office is mobilizing. Ethan felt his pulse quicken. Victoria the city, not the island? Correct, Haz said. Downtown hotel. We'll have eyes on the location within 20 minutes. But 20 minutes, Ethan knew, was an eternity in operational time. If Zhao was smart and everything suggested he was, he'd access the files, verify them quickly, and disappear before law enforcement could respond. They needed something to slow him down, to keep him in place long enough for the trap to close. Hannah, Ethan said, send another message. Tell them you need immediate confirmation that your brother is safe, or you'll trigger a kill switch that corrupts the files. Make it urgent. Hannah typed rapidly, and this time the response took longer, nearly 10 minutes. When it finally came, the message was simple: video call in 5 minutes. Be ready, Victoria looked at Ethan. They want to see her face. They're getting suspicious. Or they want to negotiate directly, Ethan said. He turned to Hannah. Can you hold it together for a video call? Keep them talking without giving anything away? I don't know, Hannah said honestly. I'm terrified. Use that, Ethan advised. They expect you to be scared. Just remember, your brother is safe. Whatever they threaten, it's empty. They have no leverage anymore. The video call request came through on Hannah's encrypted messaging app. She accepted it, and the screen filled with an image of a hotel room, generic and impersonal. Shun Zhao sat at a desk, his unremarkable face now carrying a cold intensity that the surveillance photos hadn't captured. Miss Clark, he said, his English accented but precise. Your files are incomplete again. The security protocols are corrupted. This is unacceptable. Hannah's face went pale. What? That's impossible. I sent you everything. Impossible. I sent you everything. Do not play games with me, Zhao said, his voice dropping to something dangerous. You have already cost me millions with your sabotage of Dr. Brown's theft. Now you send corrupted files again. I think you are working with authorities. I'm not, Hannah said, her voice breaking convincingly. I swear, I gave you everything. Maybe the transfer corrupted the data. Let me resend it. Zhao studied her through the screen. Where is your brother now? Hannah's breath caught. What do you mean? He's where he's always been. I had my people check on him 2 hours ago, Zhou said. He has been moved. Protective custody. So either you warned him or someone else did. Which means you have been compromised. Ethan's hand moved to Hannah's shoulder, squeezing gently. Keep him talking, the gesture said. I don't know anything about that, Hannah said. Maybe the prison moved him for their own reasons. It happens. Zhao leaned closer to his camera. You are lying. And now you have become a liability I cannot afford. He glanced at something off-screen. I have people very close to Ms. Thompson's estate. If you do not provide working files within 1 hour, I will demonstrate how serious I am about protecting my investment. The call ended abruptly. Victoria stood frozen. He has people near the estate. Right now. Ethan was already moving, pulling out his phone and calling the FBI tactical team stationed around the property. This is Graves. We have a credible threat of imminent attack on the estate. I need all units on high alert and a full perimeter sweep. Agent Hayes came back on the line. Our team in Victoria is moving on Zhao's hotel now. But if he has assets already deployed at your location, they'll be operating independently. How many personnel do you have on site? 6 FBI agents plus private security, Ethan said. But the estate is large, heavily wooded. If someone's already inside the perimeter, we need to assume they're armed and dangerous. He turned to Victoria and Hannah. Both of you, upstairs to the safe room, now. Victoria's estate had a reinforced panic room on the 2nd floor, equipped with communications equipment and supplies for extended lockdown. But Victoria shook her head. Riley's still at school. We need to get him. Ethan's blood went cold. In the rush of setting the trap, he'd momentarily lost sight of the most important variable. What time does school let out? 20 minutes, Victoria said, checking her watch. Call the school, Ethan ordered. Tell them to initiate lockdown protocols and not to release any students until law enforcement arrives. I'll coordinate with local police. The next 15 minutes were controlled chaos. Victoria spoke with the school's principal, while Ethan worked with Canadian authorities to dispatch officers to the campus. FBI agents swept the estate grounds, finding evidence of surveillance equipment that had been placed during the previous night's intrusion, but no immediate sign of hostile personnel. Then Ethan's phone rang. Unknown number. He answered. Graves. Mr. Graves, Zhao's voice was calm, almost pleasant. I understand you are the one who has complicated my business arrangement with Miss Clark. I admire your competence, truly. But you have put me in a difficult position, and now I must respond proportionally. If you're trying to threaten me, save it, Ethan said. The FBI is closing in on your location right now. I am no longer at that location, Zhao said. But I am somewhere you care about very much. The international school on the island, such a charming place. I'm watching your son through the window of his classroom right now. He is working on what appears to be a science project about communication interference. Ironic, yes? Everything inside Ethan went cold and sharp. If you touch him, there is nowhere on earth you can hide. I have no interest in harming a young person, Zhao said. But I need the working algorithm files, and I need them within 30 minutes. Deliver them to me personally at the school, or I will be forced to create a situation that becomes very public and very tragic. Do you understand? I understand, Ethan said, his voice steady despite the fear coursing through him. 30 minutes. The call ended. Victoria stared at him. He's at Riley's school. Yes, Ethan said. He was already moving, grabbing his jacket and checking the concealed carry holster he'd worn since arriving at the estate. Call Hayes. Tell her Zhao is at West Shore International School and consider him armed and extremely dangerous. I'm going to get my son. The FBI can handle this, Victoria said. Let them go in. Ethan met her eyes. That's my son in there. I'm not waiting. The drive to West Shore International School took 12 minutes that felt like hours. Ethan pushed Victoria's Range Rover hard along the winding coastal road, his mind simultaneously running tactical scenarios and fighting waves of raw fear. Riley was in danger because of choices Ethan had made, because he'd agreed to help Victoria, because he'd stepped back into a world where consequences cascaded beyond control. Agent Hayes called as he drove. We have units converging on the school, ETA 8 minutes. Zhao has made no aggressive moves yet, but we've confirmed his presence on campus. He entered through a maintenance access door using stolen credentials. What's the school's status? Ethan demanded. Lockdown initiated. All students secured in classrooms. Local police have established a perimeter. But Graves, you need to wait for tactical teams. Don't go in alone. 8 minutes is too long, Ethan said. He gave me 30 minutes total. I'm already down to 18. If he thinks I'm not coming, he might escalate. Then stall him, Hayes said. Keep him talking. We just need a few more minutes. Ethan ended the call as the school came into view, a modern building of glass and timber nestled among Douglas firs. Police vehicles blocked the main entrance, lights flashing. Officers in tactical gear moved with purpose, establishing positions. Ethan parked and approached the command post, where a Royal Canadian Mounted Police inspector was coordinating with FBI agents via secure radio. I'm Ethan Graves, he said, showing identification. My son is inside. The suspect called me directly and demanded I deliver files in exchange for safe resolution. The inspector, a woman in her 40s with steel-gray eyes, studied him. You're the American consultant working with Ms. Thompson. Agent Hayes briefed us. Mr. Graves, we cannot allow you to enter until we've secured the building and verified the suspect's exact location. He's in my son's classroom, Ethan said. 3rd floor, West Wing. He told me so on the phone. Then that's where our tactical team will focus, the inspector said. But protocol requires we clear each floor systematically. We cannot risk him having explosives or taking hostages if we rush in carelessly. Ethan understood the logic. But logic felt meaningless when Riley was inside with a man desperate enough to threaten violence against young people. He thought of his son's face that morning at breakfast, excited about showing his science project to the class. He thought of every promise he'd made after Lauren died to keep Riley safe, to be present, to never let work compromise what mattered most. And he'd broken those promises by bringing Riley here. His phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. Time is passing, Mr. Graves. I'm waiting. Ethan showed it to the inspector. He's getting impatient. Let me establish contact at least. I can buy time while your team gets into position. The inspector hesitated, then nodded. Voice contact only. Keep him talking about logistics, about what he wants, about anything except the tactical situation. We need 15 minutes to be in position for optimal entry. Ethan called the number Zhao had used earlier. It rang twice before connecting. Mr. Graves, Zhao said. I see police vehicles outside. This was not our agreement. The police were already responding to the school's lockdown call, Ethan said, keeping his voice measured. You knew that would happen. But I'm here, and I have what you want. Tell me how you want to do this exchange. Come to the main entrance alone, Zhao said. Bring the files on a USB drive. Once I verify they are complete and functional, I will walk out through the front door and everyone goes home safely. I need proof my son is unharmed first, Ethan said. A moment of silence. Then Riley's voice came through the phone, small and scared, but trying to be brave. Dad, there's a man here. He says everything will be okay if you just do what he asks. Hearing his son's voice, Ethan felt something break and harden simultaneously inside him. Riley, listen to me. I'm right outside. You're going to be fine. Just stay calm and do exactly what your teacher says. Understand? Okay, Riley said. Dad, I'm scared. I know, bud. I'm coming. Zhao's voice returned. Touching, truly. Now you understand what is at stake. The USB drive, Mr. Graves. You have 10 minutes. The call ended. Ethan turned to the inspector. I need a USB drive loaded with the algorithm files. The real ones, not the tracked version. If he verifies them on site and they're corrupted, he'll know immediately. We cannot give a hostile actor proprietary technology worth millions, the inspector said. Then he'll start hurting students, Ethan said flatly. Your choice. Victoria's voice came from behind him. Give him what he wants. She'd arrived in a second vehicle, her face pale but determined. I don't care about the algorithms or the company or any of it. Just get those people out safely. The inspector looked between them, then spoke into her radio. Within minutes, an FBI technician produced a USB drive loaded with complete functional algorithm files. Ethan took it, feeling its weight in his palm like a grenade with the pin pulled. Weight in his palm like a grenade with the pin pulled. Our tactical team will be in position in 8 minutes, the inspector said. When you make the exchange, try to position yourself so you're not between our snipers and the target. And Mr. Graves, if something goes wrong, drop flat and let us handle it. Ethan nodded and started toward the school's main entrance. The distance felt immense, every step carrying him closer to a confrontation he'd spent 3 years trying to avoid. He thought of all the times in his intelligence career when he'd walked into dangerous situations armed with nothing but training and necessity. But this was different. This time his son's life hung in the balance, and failure meant a loss he couldn't survive. He reached the entrance and held up the USB drive so Zhao could see it through the glass doors. His phone rang immediately. Good, Zhao said. Now open the door slowly and place the drive on the floor inside the entrance. Then step back 10 paces. And Ethan complied, his movements deliberate and non-threatening. The USB drive sat on the polished floor like an offering. Through the glass he could see movement in the shadowed hallway beyond. Then Zhao appeared, walking toward the entrance with steady confidence. He wasn't holding a weapon visibly, but his right hand stayed inside his jacket pocket. When he bent to retrieve the USB drive, Ethan saw the bulge of a shoulder holster beneath his coat. Zhao examined the drive, then pulled out a small tablet and inserted it. For 30 seconds that stretched like hours, he tested the files while Ethan stood frozen, aware of sniper rifles trained on the scene from multiple angles. Finally, Zhao looked up and smiled. Genuine, Ms. Thompson is more reasonable than I expected. He pocketed the drive. Your son will be released with the others when I am safely away from this location. That wasn't the deal, Ethan said. You said everyone goes home once you verified the files. I said I would walk out the front door, Zhao corrected. I did not specify when. I need transportation and clear passage to the ferry terminal. Once I am on the mainland, I will call the school and tell them which classroom to unlock. Before Ethan could respond, Riley's voice echoed from somewhere inside the building. Dad! The sound of running footsteps followed. Rayleigh burst around a corner, having apparently slipped away from his classroom during the chaos. He ran toward the entrance where Ethan stood on the other side of the glass. Riley, no! Ethan shouted, but his son was already at the door, pushing it open. And Zhao, reacting with desperate speed, grabbed Riley by the arm and pulled him close. His other hand emerging from his jacket with a compact pistol now pressed against Riley's side. Everything stopped. Foolish, Zhao said, backing away from the entrance with Riley held against him as a shield. Very foolish. Now we negotiate new terms, Mr. Graves, and this time you will not have the luxury of police assistance. Time fractured into crystalline moments. Ethan watched Zhao retreat down the hallway with Riley held against him, the pistol pressed to his son's ribs. Every instinct screamed at him to charge forward, but years of tactical training overrode the panic. A hostage situation in a confined space with armed officers outside meant any sudden movement could trigger catastrophe. Zhao, Ethan called, his voice steady despite the terror clawing at his chest. You don't want to hurt him. He's not part of this. He became part of this when he ran toward danger instead of away from it, Zhao replied, still backing down the corridor toward a side exit. Brave but foolish. Like his father. Riley's eyes were wide with fear, but he wasn't crying. He'd gone very still, the way Ethan had taught him during their fire safety talks. Don't panic, assess, wait for the right moment. His son was thinking, and that both terrified and reassured Ethan. Through his earpiece, connected to the tactical command, the inspector's voice came sharp and urgent. Graves, we have no clean shot. He's using the boy as full cover. Can you keep him talking while we reposition? Ethan pressed the mic button hidden on his collar twice, the signal for acknowledged. Then he took 3 steps forward, hands visible and empty. You have the files, Ethan said. You have everything you came for. Let Riley go, and I'll guarantee you safe passage out of here. I'll personally escort you to wherever you need to go. Zhao laughed, the sound echoing off the school's high ceilings. You have no authority to guarantee anything, Mr. Graves. You are a consultant, a civilian who got lucky on an airplane. The police outside will never let me leave. Files or no files. Then what's your play here? Ethan asked, still advancing slowly. You can't stay in this building forever. You can't shoot your way out. And you can't hurt Riley without losing your only leverage. My play, Zhao said, reaching the side exit door and pushing it open with his back, is to disappear the way I always have. You see, Mr. Graves, I have been doing this work for 20 years. I know how to vanish when circumstances require it. He stepped through the doorway into a loading area behind the school. Ethan followed, emerging into gray daylight and cold air. The space was bordered by forest on 3 sides, the trees thick enough to provide cover. Zhao was heading for the tree line, pulling Riley with him. Tactical teams are moving to cut off his escape route through the forest, the inspector's voice said through the earpiece. But we're 60 seconds out. Can you slow him down? Ethan knew he had one option, the only move that might work without risking Riley further. He had to make himself more valuable as a hostage than his son. Zhao, he called out. I worked intelligence for nearly a decade. I know things about encryption backdoors, about classified communication protocols that would be worth 10 times what those algorithms are worth to you. Take me instead of Riley. A scared young person slows you down, but I can help you disappear permanently. Zhao paused at the forest edge, considering. Riley looked at his father with understanding beyond his years, and Ethan saw him mouth the word, "Dad," silently. "An interesting proposition," Zhao said. "But how do I know you're not simply trying to save your son?" "Because I'm telling you the truth," Ethan said. "I can give you access to systems that will make you invisible to every intelligence agency on the planet. But only if Riley walks away right now." For 5 seconds that felt eternal, Zhao weighed the offer. Then he shoved Riley forward. "Run to your father, quickly." Riley stumbled but caught himself and ran. Ethan caught him, pulling him close for one fierce second before pushing him toward the school. "Go inside, find the police, do not look back." Riley hesitated, tears finally spilling down his cheeks. "Don't leave me again." "I won't," Ethan promised. "I'll be right behind you." Riley ran, and Ethan turned back to face Zhao, who now had the pistol aimed directly at his chest. "Walk toward me, Mr. Graves, slowly, hands where I can see them." Ethan complied, moving into the forest's shadow. Behind him, he heard shouts as Riley reached the officers, and they realized what had happened. Ahead, Zhao backed deeper into the trees. "The information I promised," Ethan said. "It's real, but you need me alive to access it." "I'm aware," Zhao said. "Which is why you will walk with me to the service road on the other side of this forest, where I have transportation waiting. Once we are away from immediate danger, you will provide me with a sample of this information. If it proves valuable, you live. If you have lied, you die here and I take my chances alone." They moved through the forest, Douglas firs rising like cathedral pillars around them. Ethan's mind raced through scenarios. The tactical team would be tracking them, probably had thermal imaging by now. But they wouldn't risk a shot while Zhao held a gun on him. He needed to create an opening, a moment where the advantage shifted. Then he heard it, a soft rustle in the undergrowth to their left. Zhao heard it too, and swung toward the sound, his pistol tracking. In that fraction of a second when the weapon wasn't aimed at Ethan, muscle memory took over. Ethan lunged forward, low and fast, driving his shoulder into Zhao's midsection. The pistol discharged, the sound shockingly loud in the forest quiet, but the round went wide. They crashed together into the soft earth and dead needles. Grappling for control of the weapon, Zhao was smaller but surprisingly strong, trained in close combat. He drove an elbow toward Ethan's temple. Ethan blocked it and twisted, getting a hand on Zhao's wrist and slamming it against a tree root until the pistol fell free. Both men scrambled for it. Ethan reached it first, but Zhao kicked it away, sending it spinning into the undergrowth. Then they were fighting hand to hand, trading blows with desperate intensity. A branch cracked nearby. Tactical officers burst through the trees, weapons raised, shouting commands. "Down on the ground. Both of you, down now." Zhao made one last desperate move, reaching for something in his jacket. Ethan didn't hesitate. He swept Zhao's legs and drove him face first into the earth, pinning him with a knee between his shoulder blades, exactly as he'd done to William Brown on the jet. "Clear," Ethan called out, raising his hands as officers surrounded them. "Suspect is secured." They pulled Zhao to his feet and cuffed him. His face was bloodied from the fall, his expensive suit torn and muddy, but his eyes still held cold calculation. "This is not over," he said to Ethan. "People like me, we always find a way." "People like you," Ethan replied, breathing hard, "always underestimate people like me. We don't do this for money. We do it because it matters. We do it because it matters." As they led Zhao away, Victoria appeared at the forest edge with Riley clutching her hand. The moment Ethan saw them, his legs almost gave out. Riley broke free and ran, crashing into his father with enough force to knock them both off balance. "You said you wouldn't leave," Riley sobbed into Ethan's chest. "You promised." "I didn't leave," Ethan said, holding his son like he'd never let go. I'm right here. I'm always right here. Victoria stood a few feet away, her professional composure finally cracking. Tears tracked down her face as she watched father and son hold each other in the gray forest light dot, and for the first time in 3 years, Ethan Graves allowed himself to believe that, maybe, just maybe, he could have both. A life that mattered and the people who made that life worth living. 6 weeks later, spring arrived on Vancouver Island with an explosion of cherry blossoms and the return of eagles to the coastline. The threat that had brought Ethan and Riley to Victoria's estate had been dismantled piece by piece. Chun Zhao faced multiple federal charges across 2 countries. Hannah Clark received immunity in exchange for testimony, and her brother Thomas was transferred to a minimum security facility with an early release date under consideration. Ethan stood on the deck of Victoria's estate watching Riley and 3 classmates from the international school launch model rockets in the meadow below. His son had adapted to island life with surprising ease, making friends and excelling in his science classes. The temporary arrangement had become something more permanent, though neither Ethan nor Victoria had explicitly named it yet. Coffee? Victoria appeared beside him, 2 mugs in hand. She'd shed the severe business attire of their first meeting, wearing jeans and a casual sweater that made her look younger and more relaxed. "Thanks," Ethan said, accepting the mug. Riley's rocket design is getting more sophisticated. He added a recovery parachute system that actually works. "He gets that from you," Victoria said. "The analytical thinking, the attention to detail. He gets the courage from his mother," Ethan replied. "The way he handled himself during the crisis, I saw Lauren in him. She would have been proud." They stood in comfortable silence, watching the rockets arc into the blue sky. The past weeks had brought an unexpected rhythm to their lives. Ethan had officially joined Helix Global as Director of Security Operations, a role that let him work mostly from the estate while Riley attended school. Victoria had restructured her executive schedule to include more time away from the Seattle headquarters. Claiming the island location improved her strategic thinking, but both of them knew the truth. What had begun in crisis had evolved into something neither wanted to lose. "I've been thinking," Victoria said carefully, "about making some changes. Helix doesn't need me physically present in Seattle every day. We've proven the remote model works. And Riley seems happy here." "You seem happy here." Ethan met her eyes. "Are you asking us to stay permanently?" "I'm asking if you'd consider it," Victoria said. "Not as an employee and his son staying in the employer's guest house. As something more intentional. As family." The word hung between them, full of possibility and risk. Ethan thought about the life he'd built after Lauren's death. Small and safe and focused entirely on Riley. He thought about how that life had been good, but also limited. Defined more by what he was protecting against than what he was building toward. "Riley asked me last night if you were going to be his new mom," Ethan said quietly. "I didn't know how to answer. What did you tell him?" Victoria asked. "I told him that families come in different shapes, and that what matters is choosing people who make you feel safe and valued and loved. Then I asked him how he felt about you, and?" Victoria's voice was soft. "He said you're smart and funny, and you let him stay up past bedtime sometimes when I'm not looking," Ethan smiled. "He said you make me smile more than I used to. And he said if I wanted to be happy again, he'd be okay with that." Victoria's eyes glistened. "He's remarkable, Ethan. You both are." "So are you," Ethan said. He took her hand, feeling the warmth of her fingers against his. "I spent 3 years believing my life was about protecting what I had left. But maybe it's actually about building something new. Not replacing what was lost, but growing around it. Is that a yes?" Victoria asked. "It's a yes to trying," Ethan said. "To staying, to building a life here together, to seeing where this goes. Riley and I talk about everything, and he deserves to be part of this decision. But if he's ready, then I am too." Down in the meadow, Riley's rocket deployed its parachute perfectly, drifting down in a graceful arc while his friends cheered. He looked up toward the deck, saw his father and Victoria standing close together, and waved with unrestrained joy. Ethan waved back, feeling something settle in his chest that had been restless for years. Not the absence of grief. Lauren would always be part of him, but the presence of hope. The understanding that life could hold multiple truths at once, loss and love, memory and new beginning. Courage born from pain and joy, earned through choosing to stay open. There's one condition, Victoria said. You teach me to make those pierogi Riley keeps talking about, she said with a smile. Apparently Mrs. Kowalski's recipe is legendary, and I refuse to be outdone in my own kitchen. Ethan laughed, the sound genuine and free. Deal, though I warn you, the edge-pinching technique takes practice. As the sun moved toward evening and the rockets continued their flights, Ethan allowed himself to imagine the future not as something to fear or protect against, but as something to build with intention and hope. A life where his past training served present purpose, where Riley grew up surrounded by love and possibility, where the woman beside him challenged and supported him in equal measure. The quiet life he'd sought after leaving intelligence work had found him after all. But it looked different than he'd expected. Not smaller or safer, but richer and more connected. Not about hiding from the world, but about engaging with it from a place of strength and choice. And standing there on the deck with Victoria's hand in his, and Riley's laughter rising from the meadow below, Ethan Graves finally understood what redemption felt like. Not the erasing of past pain, but the courage to let new light in despite it. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.